Sound check 1 2 3. Sound check 1 2 3.
Good to go? Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the General Issues Committee budget meeting of January 25th, 2024. I'm calling this meeting to order. A reminder that all electronic devices are to be switched to a non-audible function. In chambers this morning in our new seating arrangement, Councillor Jackson, Councillor McMeekin, Councillor Wang, Councillor Spadafora, Councillor Maureen Wilson, Councillor Taddison, Mayor Horvath, Councillor Beattie, Councillor Kassar, Councillor Kretsch, Councillor Clark, and Councillor Alex Wilson. And joining us online is Councillor Matt Francis. Madam Clerk, are there any changes to today's agenda?
Yes, Mr. Chair, there are added minutes, item 3.1 from January 22nd and 3.2 from January 23rd.
Thank you. I need a mover and a seconder to approve the agenda as amended. Moved by Councillor Spadafora, seconded by Councillor Kassar. All in favor or opposed? That carries unanimously. Are there any declarations of interest this morning? Not seeing any. On to item 3, approval of the minutes of the previous meeting. We have 2 sets of minutes, one from January 22nd, 2024, one from January 23rd, 2024. I need a mover and a seconder to approve the minutes of the previous meetings. Moved by Councillor Francis, seconded by Councillor Spadafora. All in favor or opposed? And that carries unanimously. And just before we go into our staff presentations, we do have a hard stop today as the Police Services Board is meeting in this same room after lunch. So we do have to finish by our specific time. I don't think it'll be a problem, but just letting you know in advance. So on to staff presentations. Item 6.1, Corporate Services Department, the 2024 budget presentation. Mike Zagaric, the General Manager of Finance and Corporate Services, will provide the presentation.
Good morning. Through the chair, I'll just ask if clerks can help with respect to loading the presentation. Thank you. As we're doing that through the chair, it's my pleasure to present the Corporate Services proposed 2024 budget. I'm joined by Corporate Services leadership team at the SLT table, joined by Shelley Hesmer, our Acting Director of Financial Services Taxation, Janet Pilon, at the clerk's desk, our acting city clerk, Doug Kay, our acting director of IT, Brian McMullen, our director of planning policy administration, Cindy Mercanti, our director of customer service, POA, and financial integration. Unfortunately, Lisa Shields wasn't able to join us today. Lisa is our city solicitor, and I see Laura Fontana sitting there. I'm not sure if she's a wannabe member of the Corporate Services DLT, but I also want to recognize and thank Maya Walters. Maya Walters is our finance administration manager who supports corporate services, and she'll have a few tasks today as she supports the city manager's office as well, and then tomorrow as well as she supports planning and economic development. Just a reminder in terms of where we are with respect to the process. The intent for today is for committee to receive the 2024 proposed corporate services budget and to answer any questions committee members might have. Corporate services is a department of about 581 dedicated and professional members, including the distributed staff, and you'll see asterisks in those departments that have distributed staff. Distributed staff are staff that are funded through the departmental budgets that we support. The 2024 departmental organization structure shows Council's approved amendment in the establishment of a procurement division. Through the corporate services team, the department contributes towards the City of Hamilton's vision to be the best place to raise a child and age successfully. The department provides critical support services and targeted professional advice in the fields of law, risk management, information technology, municipal governance, financial management, provincial offenses administration, and customer service to council, boards and agencies, internal departments, and key stakeholders in order to successfully achieve strategic objectives. An array of financial and administrative support is offered across the organization to help fund and deliver vital programs and services to the citizens of the city. With respect to advancing council priorities, corporate services aids Council's priority of sustainable economic and ecological development through the exploration and introduction of new revenue tools, including a stormwater rate and a vacant unit tax. With respect to reducing the burden on residential taxpayers, corporate services actively participates in property assessment appeals. These are principally commercial and industrial appeals. In 2022, there were approximately 33 appeals, commercial and industrial appeals. The city was successful in preserving approximately 91% of the potential loss of assessment and associated taxes. What does that mean? We are able to retain approximately $8.9 million in commercial and industrial property taxes that otherwise would have shifted over to the residential sector. With respect to 2023, we'll have our results for 2023 in March of 2024. With respect to responsive and transparency, and with respect to modernized city systems, the department leads or supports in a number of modernization of business solution initiatives so as to advance security of data while improving ease of use. In some cases, the department is a lead. For example, the development of tools and structure surrounding the utilization of data and safeguarding of data. In other cases, the department works in collaboration with other internal and external partners to modernize systems. This includes Next Generation 911 and internal systems like PeopleSoft that will advance the employee experience while being able to more effectively communicate with the city's employees. Corporate services aids in building a high-performing public service. In addition to modernization efforts to build a high-performing public service includes efforts and investments that reduce risks, including investment in IT hardware and software that are end of life, and through the refresh of these platforms, allowing for enriched features, capabilities, stability, sustainability, administration, and reporting. Also, the department supports council on a number of fronts, including the processes related to recruitment of the Integrity Commissioner and Lobbyist Registrar. The department, in collaboration with other parts of the organization, also supports meeting legislative requirements. For example, meeting the governance requirements relating to the Fixing Long-Term Care Act. In the 2024 proposed budget, you'll see that it includes necessary investments in the organizational capacity, more specifically, investments in enabling a high-performing procurement division with a better span of control and oversight, and empowering procurement to assist in broader community matters. Notwithstanding some workload challenges, procurement were able to advance modernization by issuing all contracts through a digital form, resulting in more efficient means of executing documents and a better overall management of city documents. The department also supports a municipal election process, and the committee will note some proposed investments in the form of a business case in response to the recommendations in an audit of the 2022 municipal election. The department also works in collaboration with the City Manager's Office and the Chief Digital Officer to support the implementation of the city's digital strategy, including transition to an enterprise point-of-sale system and transition to electronic filing of red light camera charges. And finally, in 2023, Council approved the upgrade of the Customer Contact Center end-of-life customer relationship management software. In 2023, staff completed a number of tasks as to start the transition from our current end-of-life software to a new Microsoft platform. And please note that there's some additional funds requested through the 2024 business case. Also in 2023, Council approved securing the 311 phone number. The city has been working with telecom providers and neighboring communities in the current testing phase. Estimated time for testing to be complete is March and April of this year. And in 2024, through the enterprise customer service strategy, there'll be direction for public rollout of the 311 number. The corporate services team also supports the organization in protecting city assets, including staff supporting 75 sessions held on fraud prevention. In an effort to support council and the committee in better understanding the audited financial statements, in 2023, staff worked with the city's external auditors to respond to a committee motion to prepare an executive summary to the 2022 consolidated financial statements for the city, trying to use clear writing standards. Now moving on to the proposed 2024 corporate services budget. The proposed 2024 corporate services budget represents an increase of approximately $3.3 million, or 7.4%. This includes a series of business cases and a council referred item. Apologize. And a council referred item that amount to approximately $1.2 million or 2.9%. The balance of about $2.1 million or 4.8% represents investments needed to maintain current service levels and programs. It also includes $600,000 as it relates to council's approved investments in the procurement division. So just wanting to point out that the increase also funds and captures that $600,000 related investment to supporting the procurement division. I'll talk to greater detail with respect to the proposed budget in subsequent slides. With respect to complement, you'll note that the 2023 restated complement relative to the 2023 approved complement represents a difference of approximately 15 FTEs. This 15 FTEs relates to 9 FTEs for the vacant unit tax and 6 FTEs as it relates to the investments in procurement division. I'll also take the opportunity to speak to the potential additional FTEs relating to business cases and council referred items. The business cases represent a total of 10 additional FTEs for 2024. 2 FTEs in response to the recommendations of the elections audit. 1 FTE to support City 311 in the digital strategy. 1 FTE to support the role of an IT architect to aid in modernization and integration of city systems. And finally, 6 FTE, transitioning existing part-time and temporary staff into full-time positions. So again, a total of 10 FTEs, and you'll see through the balance of the budget presentation, staff are recommending that 7 of those FTEs be funded sustainably through the use of reserves, program reserves, leaving 3 FTEs to be funded through the levy. I also want to point out that Corporate Services Departmental Leadership Team also looked at existing complement, and we're recommending repurposing 1.25 FTEs towards reducing the overall needs of the business cases. With respect to the 2024 Corporate Services operating budget, you'll see, like the tax budget in general, the funding corporate services relies heavily on property taxes. You'll see that property taxes represent approximately 76% of the funds that support the departmental budget. Provincial, apologize, I'm not sure how I'm doing that. Provincial offences administration is funded through provincial offences charges, and that represents just short of $8 million, or approximately 13% of the associated cost for the department. User fees represent approximately $3.9 million, or 6%. Again, the vacant unit tax, and again, this presentation was prepared back in December, so we've had different iterations with respect to the vacant unit tax. We were assuming $1.9 million with respect to proceeds from the vacant unit tax, and again, that will be adjusted based on the subsequent or expected approval of the bylaw, and investment income approximately $1.1 million. The investment income is very specific to our staff who supports investments. We have 3 staff who supports our investment portfolio. Those 3 staff members are funded through our investment income. So further breaking down the Corporate Services 2024 proposed budget, employee-related costs represent 96% of the department's budgeted expenditures. So again, with respect to staffing being the prominent resource, again, staffing costs make up 96% of expenditures. And with respect to the increase, 2024 increase, employee-related costs makes up 75% of the increase. So you'll note the top 4 lines relate to employee-related investments. There are salary increases related to either government benefits, employee benefits, as well as collective agreements, and potentially merit increases for those staff eligible for merit increases. And then there are wage increases tied to collective agreements. The procurement reorganization approved in 2023, again, represents approximately $600,000, or 1.3%, and then annualization of a number of enhancements in 2023. These were principally employee-related enhancements in legal, as it relates to Bill 109, Bill 13, with respect to the tax appeals I spoke to previously, and then finally 2 enhancements in 2023 for IT services. Again, principally employee-related enhancements. So those 4 top-line categories make up approximately 6.8%, or represent approximately a 6.8% increase. And then you'll see some additional investments in facility charges and insurance costs. Offsetting those investments or pressures is additional $1.1 million in revenues or savings, resulting in that 4.8% increase, or about 2.1%. So specific to the revenues or mitigation strategies, you may recall last Friday I spoke to part of the corporate strategy in terms of mitigation was increasing our gapping targets, increasing them by $1.2 million. Corporate Services is absorbing approximately half of that increase, increasing our gapping target from approximately $600,000 to $1.2 million. We believe that that is achievable based on historical actuals for the department. In addition, some user fee increases of about $300,000. One of those increases is a 30% increase towards our tax arrears processing fee, and that is an increase from $3.30 to $4.30. So, Councillor Wang, you asked, are there examples where we've proposed a user fee increase over and above full cost recovery? That's one. And what we've done is aligned it to our comparators. So again, not a significant increase of about $1, but again, we're looking at all opportunities to reduce our reliance on the levy and property taxes. With respect to council referred items, there is one council referred item, and that is the continued phase-in of organizational capacity investments in our procurement division. This council referred the results of an organizational review addressing the need for strategically delivered services and initiatives as it relates to procurement in support of council priorities, and to carry out some service improvements and betterments resulting from an internal audit and recommendations with respect to, for instance, vendor performance and contractual management. In addition, the investment in procurement is expected to expand the role of procurement as it relates to broader community matters and interests. This includes community benefits, social, green, and circular procurement. And that represents a 2024 net impact of approximately $523,000. I'll note it references 8 FTEs. 2 were already approved through the 2024 rate supported budget, leaving approximately 6 FTEs for consideration through the 2024 tax budget. In 2023, the Office of the Auditor General delivered on council-directed audit to review and assess the adequacy and effectiveness of systems, resources, agreements, policies, and procedures in place to administer the 2022 election, including various processes related to logistics, communications, planning, and preparations. The Office of the Attorney General made 50 recommendations to the City Clerk for consideration leading up to the next election. These recommendations would strengthen compliance, improve process efficiency and effectiveness, enhance the candidate and voter experience, and identifies areas where the city can advocate to the province of Ontario. In response to the recommendations, the Clerk's office is proposing a 2024 investment of about $550,000. This includes 2 FTEs, or about $216,000 of the $550,000. The FTEs would be project managers, one to support election operations, logistics, and a further project manager to support elections education, recruitment, and training. Over and above the investments in staffing, the balance, or about $333,000, is intended to fund some temporary resources, and temporary because elections are 4-year cycles. And so staff have identified the opportunity for investments in response to the Auditor General's recommendations of a dedicated communication support in the form of an 18-month temporary placement, a IT project manager for a 24-month temporary placement, temporary election staff with experience in recruitment and training, and some additional support for the development of procurement and e-filing software with respect to an appointment booking software. some temporary election staff dedicated to candidate support, and finally, temporary resource to support alternative voting methods. So all these temporary supports, again, represent approximately $333,000 of the requested $550,000. In addition, staff are recommending some additional IT support for City 311 in the digital strategy. You'll see zero net, and that staff are recommending that that resource be funded from reserves. With respect to modernization of the city systems, staff have identified that there are a series of multi-year enterprise IT initiatives related to modernization, and these include administrative penalty systems, enterprise asset management, water billing 311, that require some overall direction and coordination. Staff are recommending an IT architect to assist as it relates to modernization and integration on a go-forward basis. And again, that represents a net levy impact of approximately $118,000. With respect to the IT customer service excellence enhancements, you'll see that while staff are requesting 6 FTEs, there is no impact to the 24 net levy. IT has been relying on some temporary staff with respect to IT customer service, 6 FTEs. Under our current complement control policy, after a period of time, 24 months, staff are required to have council approval for those FTEs. So staff are seeking that approval as 6 FTEs. We will be funding this within the existing IT program. In part, the IT program is supported through the IT management reserve. So again, no financial impact to 2024, but requiring council's approval for the additional 6 FTE. And then again, just wanting to reinforce that these positions have been in place in an effort to try to improve the customer satisfaction levels at the IT service desk and the response times. Just looking forward in terms of 2025, 26, 27, corporate services are identifying some additional investments, both in terms of IT and finance. But again, what we're also factoring in and considering is continuing to revise that gapping target. And so as we continue to experience what we hope will be a normal level of vacancy on a go-forward basis, we are factoring in, considering some of those gapping targets to adjust. And again, if that represents further increasing the gapping target, we would bring those forward in future years. Shifting now to the capital budget. There are a number of capital projects in the 2024 tax capital budget with respect to the customer relationship management system. You'll see 2024 capital budget includes $400,000 in required investment to support the movement from the city's current end-of-life point-of-sale platform to a new platform. This money will be used to secure a technical implementation partner who will help to design and build the commerce and e-commerce platforms. With respect to financial planning policy, you'll note that every 5 years, the city is required to update and revise our community benefit charges. We've identified that in our work plan and identified that the associated costs will be funded through our community benefit fees and charges. With respect to IT, a series of capital projects in IT, the continuation of our next generation 911, our IT security program, as well as asset management for IT and enterprise data management strategy for IT. You'll also note that under system upgrades, a Windows 11 upgrade, as well as a telephony infrastructure upgrade. And finally, with respect to our overall IT strategy, some additional investments as it relates to the refresh of our IT strategy. All of the IT capital projects represent approximately $3.7 million net, but represent approximately $11.1 million gross. We've looked through our IT WIPs, we've looked at our IT-related program reserves, and with respect to the Next Generation 911, we secured an additional $1.9 million in provincial grants for the transition to Next Generation 911. So again, just trying to explain the difference between $11.1 million in gross investments and the $3.7 million in net investments. With respect to operating impacts of capital, you'll see with respect to those capital projects, half an FTE to support our customer relationship management projects, and that's tied to upgrade and 311 customer service number. With respect to Next Generation 911, as staff have been working with our internal and external partners, including Hamilton Fire and Hamilton Police Services, we've identified that the expanded functionality on Next Generation 311 will require some additional staffing. And we are recommending 3 additional staff in IT to support the transition to that new service with associated costs of $344,000. And finally, with respect to legal and risk management, approximately $78,000 as it relates to modernizing our claims and management systems and platforms. I've spoken a bit with respect to how we've mitigated that $11 million in capital down to approximately 3.7, and this further breaks it down. Again, $1.9 million in some additional provincial funding for Next Generation 911. We've looked at our information technology projects and funding some from reserves. We've looked at previously approved projects, approximately $200,000 of WIPs, as well as some reserve funding for customer relationship management. And with respect to enterprise point of sale, similar strategy. And then finally, with respect to customer relationship management expansion and enterprise rollout, deferring that project because of some capacity issues out to 2025. So that speaks to our mitigation strategy with respect to our 2024 proposed capital projects. So in summary, again, corporate services proposed budget represents a increase of approximately $3.3 million, inclusive of the business cases and council referred. That represents about a change of 7.4%. On the capital side, a slight decrease in terms of the net impact, but again, important to note, we include approximately $7.7 million in mitigation to support the proposed capital projects. And finally, in terms of corporate services, as it relates to the overall levy, corporate services represents approximately 0.2% of the overall levy. So through the chair, happy to answer any questions that committee members might have.
Thank you, General Manager Garrick. On our speakers list, we do have a few councillors noted. Councillor Kretsch, followed by Councillor Alex Wilson, then Councillor Pauls. Councillor Kretsch, please.
Thanks very much. Since you have the presentation up still, if you wouldn't mind going to see slide 12. I just wanted to make sure that I haven't misunderstood this, but when I look at the 2024 proposed tax operating budget summary, at the bottom there, the total corporate services, so the third column from the left, it says $47,091,000, right, like $47.091 million. But the total amount that's actually reflecting the 7.4% on the far right at the bottom is actually 48 million in total, right? So if we just use that 47 number, we'd have a far lower number, probably around like 4.7%. So this number actually includes, like the budget actually includes all the business cases and quote unquote council referred decisions.
Through the chair, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. I also, in looking at the budget documents themselves, which is where I'm comparing everything to, right? I'm just trying to make sure that everything tracks and adds up the same way in all the documents we have, so I'm not losing the plot. I see that you have a total complement of 581.05, and so there's 38 full-time positions that aren't reflected in the chart that you showed us. I think it's the slide, you would know where it was, I don't know. There, straight back. Yeah, so of the 542.05 in that table you had, I think it was, go back.
There we go.
There you go, yeah. So it's actually 581.05, but there are 38 full-time equivalent positions representing, I guess, distributed staff whose budgets are in operating departments, and to me that means absolutely nothing. I think you've explained it last year, and I've lost that explanation somewhere along the way, but what does it mean for there to be distributed staff whose budgets are in operating departments?
Yeah. Through the chair, this typically ties to funding obligations that the city has with, for instance, provincial government. Where there are some cost share programs such as public health, we are required to capture those costs within the public health budget or program. And so we reflect the cost of supporting public health, whether it is financial or other corporate services related costs within their budget to meet that legislative requirement. But important to note that these are corporate services staff. And so we want to identify those as distributed. They're part of the corporate services team, but financially, because of obligations with the provincial government, we have to reflect the costs associated with those staff within their program budgets.
Thanks, and while we're here, could you tell me what the total FTE change will be once we look at the entire corporate services department budget, including business cases and council referred items? Because I know here it says 0, but that's not the whole picture.
Yeah. Through the chair, again, there are 10 FTEs being proposed through the business cases. And with respect to the council referred items, the 2 FTEs as it relates to the audit of municipal election. Sorry, I have that wrong. The audit of the municipal election are part of the 10 in the business cases, and then 6 FTEs as it relates to the council referred for procurement. So a total of 16.
Thank you. 2 more things I wanted to comment on. One was IT and the other 311. So I'm grateful that we're transitioning these IT staff to full-time. Personally, I've had a good experience trying to reach a service desk about things, but I know that we hear routinely in public at all of our committee meetings that, okay, this is happening, and there's this IT piece, and if that piece doesn't come together with everything else we're doing, then sometimes things don't work as they should. So I think making sure we have as much IT staff as we need to ensure we can robustly communicate digitally is hugely important. So I'm glad that we're making that step and hopefully making more investments. For 311, I noticed we're only investing $158,000, and in my discussions with staff about this probably a year ago now, I know the investment required to actually get us to a 311 system. It's not just a replacement phone number, but an actual live interactive system that can do something meaningful to help with our customer service obligations. Will cost millions of dollars. So we're not coming forward with that this year in the budget. When will we be doing so? What kind of investment do you think is necessary? Just want to get an understanding of what we're not doing this year, so what we can look ahead to doing in future years. Yeah. That's my last question. Thank you.
So through the chair, I'll start, and then I'll invite Director McCanty or others, potentially our Chief Digital Officer. So with respect to 2024, again, focused on the testing and transitioning to the 311 number. And then as we develop our customer service strategy, we would expect through that customer service strategy then to identify future investments as it relates to the broader 311 service, and I'll speak to it as our customer service strategy rather than the phone number. So again, that has formed part of senior leadership team's discussions in 2023, and it'll be on our work plan for 2024 to further break out what that strategy would involve in future years and how to phase in that strategy.
Through the chair to the councillors. So as you remember, in 2023, we did have a request to start the process of upgrading our CRM platform. So that was approved, and we are in the process of updating the platform, creating those foundational pieces and engaging with technical partner to assist us in that journey. As Mike mentioned in the presentation, we also have future asks, one for next year for about $600,000 to support the evolution. So rather than coming in with one big price tag, what we've done is we said we need funding for this to get us to this point, and then the next block of funding. We also have an additional capital request going in for 2025 for $150,000 a year. To your point, it's to make sure that we are able to keep up with the changes with 311, so we never find ourselves in a position where we have to spend a significant amount of money to upgrade. So the first is to get us off our current end-of-life platform, get us onto a new robust platform, start turning on enhanced features, and then make sure we have the funds to support it moving forward.
Brief follow-up, and through the chair, if it's okay, I think I have time. Thanks for that explanation. It's helpful in understanding that we're not only looking at this from a financial perspective, but it seems like you're looking at this from a transitioning people perspective also. So moving to a 311 system is not going to be sort of flicking a light switch. It's a major cultural transformation of our customer service. We're going to need time to phase those transformations through culturally as well as financially. Is that what I'm understanding you're saying?
Through the chair, that's correct. And coupled with this is the enterprise customer service strategy, which connects the dots amongst multiple channels and really looks at a holistic view of how the City of Hamilton will be providing customer service. And that capital request also is noted in the city manager's capital budget.
Thanks so much for the clarity. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor. Next on our speakers list, Councillor Alex Wilson, please.
Thank you, and through the chair, really appreciated the presentation. A couple of questions. I think the smallest one I have is just about that pie chart at the second last slide. We don't necessarily have to pull it up, but it's just the corporate services impact on the levy, and then it looks at all of our different departments, and it breaks down of that 7.9, 7.8, what's contributing. To create this chart, have we mapped all of the provincial share, all of the external pieces, all of the things that we don't necessarily control to their most accurate city department in order to make this graphic? Because we've been putting out lots of different visuals with lots of different purposes as to what they're indicating. Is this if we mapped all spending to the most relevant department, not that the spending comes from that department necessarily or is controlled by that GM?
Yeah. Through the chair, the short answer is yes. This would represent the net levy. So in the cases of healthy and safe communities, the grants or subsidies they receive would apply to their portion of the pie.
Thank you. That's really appreciated. So maybe not the best graphic to understand. If this is the only pie chart you saw of the budget, not necessarily where the money is going, but more so relative weighting of different departments is what this indicates as opposed to who's controlling what. So it just indicates something different.
Through the chair, that's correct. It really is a weighting in terms of how each department contributes to the overall levy in terms of the costs of supporting the programs or services within that department.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate that clarity. My other kind of stream of questions was around procurement. We have a lot of conversations around this table, framing things as investments or framing things as spending, and we've kind of been going back and forth about what's what. But one of the things I wanted to ask about was risk mitigation. Because we don't necessarily see those things captured in a business case where we're going to have user fees or money come in and we're paying for that staff and it's a revenue program and that's why this is an investment or that's why this is justified spending, for example. I understand since entering into this organization 13, 14 months ago, procurement's been an ongoing challenge, has identified risks to the organization. Could you expand a little bit about what some of those risks we're seeking to mitigate with this investment is?
Yeah. So through the chair, the report that came before Council in 2023 stemmed from a external review of procurement, as well as a series of Auditor General reports, in part related to some of the services procurement supports. What was identified through the external review were some challenges with respect to workload and retention. I'll say that has improved. We're having greater success in retaining staff, and in some cases, we've lost staff internally. So a bit of a feeder to other parts of the organization. Other parts of the organization have identified some talented staff, and those staff have sought out opportunities for development. So again, not necessarily a bad thing in that positive for the organization, bit of a challenge for procurement in terms of managing workload. With respect to the overall resources within procurement, since 2001, we had only increased the overall resourcing to procurement by about 2.5 FTEs. And we've been investing into our infrastructure program, and so we saw a disconnect with respect to our ability to support the issuing of projects or tenders and getting work out the door. So in part is the 6 FTEs that are being requested in 2024 was to address some of those pressures, and council's already approved. Thank you. You've already approved FTEs as it relates to the water wastewater program, and given the size and magnitude of that program. With respect to capacity, in terms of sort of those community interests, whether it's circular procurement, whether it is community benefits, whether it's a green procurement, we have had no roles or positions to support that work. And so the report that came before committee in 2023 identified some capacity and policy, as well as there's some investments in leadership in order to lead that overall procurement strategy.
Thank you. Through the chair, I think some of the pieces that I heard there were it's in 2 decades we've hired 2 staff, but we've done certainly a whole lot more spending as a city and procurement as a city over the past 2 decades. Municipalities look very different. And then as well, so legacy kind of issue there. And then as well, hearing about the kind of the role of procurement, and there's been requests from community to provide a different service level, to consider different things, and we've been telling historically community, no, we're not going to provide that service level up until now because we haven't had the resources. So this is correcting that, or potentially not even correcting that, but beginning to walk down that journey of looking at that. My question is about specifically auditing of contracts and what risk that proposes to the organization. And again, I'm just trying to clarify, there's theoretically a risk mitigation that would be financial, for example, and having a contract done on time as opposed to potentially reissuing the contract multiple times. But that won't be budgeted anywhere. There's no budgetary savings to that because that's not a risk that we currently have anywhere else in the budget. I'm just trying to understand, is there a situation where these investments are actually saving us money, but we don't necessarily see that money that we're saving?
Through the chair, great question, and I apologize, I didn't tie in my response to the councillor's reference to risk mitigation. The proposed structure also identifies a defined role to assist with vendor management, and that in part came through a series of audit reports, the need for vendor management. So that's a potential risk mitigation in terms of having now a process to identify those vendors who aren't meeting expectations as it relates to their services. The other area of the organizational structure is intended to support the organization is through contract management. So both vendor support and contract management, both on the quality side.
Thank you. Really appreciate that understanding.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Next on our speakers list is Councillor Beattie, followed by Councillor Jackson and Clark. Councillor Beattie, please.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. Thank you for the presentation, Mike. Always appreciate it. I've been looking through the big fat book, and business case 43, right at the very bottom of the ranked council referred items is the audit-based enhancements to election, just north of $500,000 to FTE. And I guess I want to preface this by saying, very clearly stating that I'm not opposed to enhancements to election, and I believe strongly in responding to audit findings. So that's the underpinnings of all of this. I think it's fundamental to building trust with our citizens. My question is along the lines of timing. So we're currently in the process of hiring a new city clerk, and I guess I'm concerned that once this new person is in place, that whatever we're approving now may or may not align with a direction that they may choose to go. And, I mean, it could be an insufficient budget, maybe the budget's too high, maybe the parameters of the envelope in this plan are not necessarily aligning with this person we have yet to hire. And so I guess I'm wondering openly if it would be advantageous to pause this until the new clerk is in place and have them come back with an updated comprehensive plan that will have their personalized spin or signature on it. Through you, Chair.
Yeah. So through the chair, how we've approached it, and I appreciate the question, how we've approached the audit recommendations is in recognition of limited resources within municipal election and print and mail. That's the section within the clerk's office to support the municipal election. We've approached it in a thoughtful way in terms of the balance between permanent FTE and temporary FTE. So again, we've tried to strike that balance. With respect to timing is why it's being proposed for 2024 is in order for those permanent FTE to sort of lay the groundwork for the next municipal election is we've identified wanting to have a 24-month window, a 2-year window or opportunity for those individuals to start to make the process changes leading up to the next municipal election. With respect to that $330,000 temporary, how municipal elections are funded, or in the case of City of Hamilton, how we fund it is they occur every 4 years, and we make an annual contribution to fund the election effectively in quarters. Each year we fund a quarter of what the expected cost is. So with respect to the $333,000, what we've done is identified what the investments would be such that those positions, temporary positions, could be funded through the next municipal election. Now, if because of competing requirements, that level of investment can't be supported through 2024, we would come back with options or alternatives. We could look at year-end, if there's a year-end surplus to fund a portion of that cost for 2024. We could double up in 2025 if 2025 is a sense in terms of timing to be a better period. But again, in terms of the need, we feel confident that those are the needed investments at this time, and just being mindful of the lead time required for the next municipal election. And to the councillor's point, things may change through alternative ways of satisfying the auditor's recommendations. But right now, based on best information, this is the strategy and the investments we've identified.
A follow-up question, Chair. Could you identify the process or risk if we did decide as a council to just put the brakes on this particular ask in the budget cycle and instead have this come back mid-year with an updated plan go forward once the new clerk is in place?
So through the chair, assuming that staff would have the opportunity to come back in 2024, is the risk may be low if there was a will of council to fund these investments in 2024 leading up to the next municipal election, or alternatively is maybe not proceeding with some of those actions for the next municipal election and introducing them in subsequent elections. But again, what we have set out to do is to satisfy the 50 recommendations, and that will be coming forward through a future report. We're just coordinating that with the Office of the Auditor General in terms of the management action plans with respect to those 50 recommendations.
Thank you, GM Zagarek. No further questions, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Next on our speakers list is Councillor Jackson, followed by Clark and Wang. Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Budget Chair Danko, and thank you, GM Zagarek. Always great work from you and your leadership team in corporate services. Without getting into any details on your organizational chart, you know I always like to see eventual permanency in the leadership underneath you, and I've noticed there's several acting and there's a vacancy, and Can you just hopefully give us some indication sometime in maybe quarter 1, 2, 3 of this year? It's on your radar and hoping for some permanent announcements one way or the other. Through you, Budget Chair Danko, please.
To the chair, I appreciate the question. We are currently in the recruitment process for the city clerk and the director of procurement in terms of those two positions. With respect to some of the other positions, in part, we wanted to allow for the onboarding of the new city manager, sort of to discuss the roles and responsibilities of some of these positions, and also in light of the review that our colleagues in HR are undertaking in terms of the organizational structure. So again, my hope would be that this org structure will look very different in terms of permanent positions next year. And again, with respect to these critical positions, we're currently in the recruitment process.
Terrific, GM Zagarek. Thank you very much, and good luck to those. On the budget operating summary, again, the 4.8 is your increase minus the council referred items and business cases. And again, could you just quickly I don't think it's been asked this week, for public consumption, because I get asked from constituents from time to time, Tom, your council referred items keep adding and bloating the budget potentially. And then I mentioned about business cases. Can you explain again? My understanding, Budget Chair Danko, is business cases are similar to council referred items in terms of they will be deliberated as an enhancement, but the business case is more the corporate bureaucracy's recommendation of what you additionally need. Maybe just a description, explanation, GM Zagarek, please.
Yeah. Through the chair, the councillor is correct, and maybe I'll just add on to it. So council referred items are issues that staff would have brought forward to council for consideration in 2023 or earlier years that were referred to the budget process. So again, generally speaking, they stem from staff reports that would represent recommendation reports, and then those recommendations are referred to the budget process by council, and hence they're termed council referred items. Business cases are stem from senior leadership identifying needs or requirements, whether it's council's priorities, whether it's legislated requirements, in order to satisfy either those priorities or legislative requirements. And I'll also note that in the budget documents beyond the council referred and the business cases, you'll see a series of enabling investments. And what we've tried to identify is whether it's a council referred item or business case, sometimes there's some resources required in order to move that work forward. And so whether that's in a housing initiative, whether it's a planning initiative, sometimes it requires services like the services corporate services delivers in order to empower or enable that work to go forward. And hence you'll see in the budget documents not only reference to council referred and business cases, but recognizing there's some associated investments that we refer to as enabling investments.
Okay, Jim, thanks for that explanation, and I think that distinction's clearer. A couple of last quick questions. Back on procurement again. We approved, if I recall, a few months ago, 6 new FTEs, and this is now the balance of the report that came forward from you for 8 more, just to be crystal clear. Through you, Budget Chair Danko, please.
Through the chair, in 2023, Council approved the 6 FTEs. And so those 6 FTEs have a financial impact of about $600,000, and that's captured and included in that $2.1 million or 4.8%. What staff are proposing is the balance of 8 FTEs. 2 were already approved through the rate supported budget, through the water budget. 6 are remaining, and what we've identified is recognizing we're in the recruitment process for the director is a June effective date with respect to those 6 FTEs. Now, if we feel that that's overly ambitious, that is something that we can look at as well, but again, with a desire to recruit those positions in 2024.
Okay, thank you, GM Zagarek. So the 6 equaled the 524,000 there, correct? Under council referred.
Through the chair, That's correct, and the previously approved 6
Are in there.
represent up 600,000 of the 2.1 million.
Okay. Last question. You know, my favorite topic in your department is POAs, because it's always, for me, Budget Chair Danko, a wonderful opportunity of revenue generation without impacting taxpayers, because this is for those that do not abide by the rules and regulations of the City of Hamilton, and mostly in the area of traffic enforcement. So Jim Zegeric, either between you or I think it's Director Mercanti, how about give us a lowdown on what's happening with POAs in terms of the backlogs? Has the backlogs improved? Is the city's revenue generation improving? I'd like to see even that little tiny amount you're putting for 1.2%. I would hope eventually be revenue neutral and or in the favorable end of a budget pressure favorably, that this area of revenue generation, again, for those that violate our rules and regulations, is forthcoming. Through you, Budget Chair Danko, and that's my last question in that area.
Through the chair, I'll invite Director Mercanti maybe to speak to trends around POA, and then I can speak to the financials.
Perfect.
Through the chair, I apologize, I didn't introduce myself before. Cindy Mercanti, Director of Customer Service, POA and Financial Integration. Thank you, Councillor, for the question. Year over year, POA charges have been fairly consistent, about 86,000 charges filed, between 85 and 86,000 charges filed through POA. I will say revenue in 2023, we had a significant increase in revenue at POA for 2023. Also, in addition, with respect to trends, some of the key drivers for charges going through POA are red light camera, automatic speed enforcement, and there has been an increase for charges filed by the Ontario Provincial Police. So that gives you a flavor of some of the activity happening in POA. I will say, with respect to the backlog, I'm happy to report that we have been able to clear, due to the great work of staff, the Part 3 backlog. So that's a huge step forward, and I also want to thank the Ministry of the Attorney General for their support in that area.
That's awesome news, Director Mercanti. GM Zegeric, an hour ago, why didn't you lead off with that? That's all right. It's okay. Any
Through the
closing,
chair, mental note for
comments?
next year, we'll start there. So with respect to POA proceeds or the proceeds related, not only do you see them as a funding source towards corporate services, but a portion of those go to reserves, like our red light camera reserves, then go towards investments in traffic and traffic safety, as well as there is within corporate financials in the 2024 budget is a portion of that goes to reduce the overall tax levy or impact to taxpayers.
Thanks, GM Zegeric, and Director Mercanti. Kudos to you and your team. Very much encouraging, favorable news this year. Thanks, Budget Chair Danko.
Thank you, Councillor. Next on our speakers list, Councillor Clark, followed by Councillor Wang.
Thank you, Chair Danko. Can I ask that page 13 go up, please? So, Chair, yesterday I had a phone call with a resident, and it wasn't specific to this chart, but it was a chart that was in yesterday's reports, and I didn't have an answer for them. So if you look in the first column, it says the 2023 council approved FTE, gives 527. Then it says in 2023, the restated budget FTE, 542. To the residents, it looked like council approved one number and staff changed it to another number. Can you explain why there's that variance? And it would be likely the same explanation for other charts, but I honestly, I was dumbfounded. He caught me off guard.
Yeah. Through this, Jay. It's a great question. And so, again, we always want to start where council ended in terms of approval of the budget. So the 527 FTEs were approved through the approval of the 2023 budget. But then issues or initiatives come up in year. And so for 2023, what came up in year in part was a phase into the vacant unit tax. We're working in part towards the implementation of the vacant unit tax in 2023. So in 2023 in year, through the approval of that report in 2022, we're 9 FTEs out of the 16 for the vacant unit tax. So again, what we want to capture is not only what council approves through the budget, but then there are some in-year approvals. Over and above the 9 for the vacant unit tax was the organizational capacity investments in procurement. Council approved in year 6 additional FTEs for procurement. So again, the 9 and the 6 represent the difference of 15 FTEs. And why we call it restated is it captures those things that happen after the budget's approved in 2023, but occur in year. So wanting to ensure, because otherwise it's very difficult to if you're just comparing budget to budget, then you're missing what happens in year outside of the budget process. So hence, we capture what is approved through the budget, what happens outside of the budget process, post-budget, and then we show our preliminary for 2024. Now again, this doesn't include the business cases, which would represent 10 FTEs for corporate services, and the council referred items, which would represent 6 as it relates to procurement. I'm hoping that helped.
It does. So realistically, Chair, the second column is the council-approved restated budget. And I think that's where the confusion was in the public. Thank you for that. Chair, I have an additional question. It's kind of ancillary to this report. If it's not right, just let me know. To our HR director, executive director, we have been struggling with vacancies at the municipality. I was wondering if we have a percentage of vacancy where we are today. We've been doing a big push to fill those vacancies.
Thank you to the chair, Executive Director Laura Fontana, Human Resources. Councillor, we're currently reviewing the vacancies. We do not have the technology that enables us to have capture an accurate number of vacancies that are available across the organization. We're starting in the city manager's office and doing the manual review and assessment. We expect with the technology that we're asking, particularly in the 2024 budget, to have the ability to capture the number of vacancies through the complement control budget, but that number isn't readily available. Can be for the city manager's office because we have undertaken a manual review and it's a relatively small department, but our technology continues to be restrictive in terms of our ability to capture that number accurately.
Thank you for that. It's very helpful.
Thank you, Councillor. Next on our speakers list, Councillor Wang.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, just a couple of questions. I really appreciated this conversation and this presentation. However, there's a couple of aspects that I feel I'm missing on this. Throughout this year, we've been talking about sustainable economic as part of our strategic priorities. We've also talked about gender-based budgeting, carbon-based budgeting. We've also talked about bonds. We've also talked about any type of revenue tools that we might want to go to the province or to the feds. But I didn't hear in your presentation how all of those sort of asks are going to be implemented, perhaps through your financial services, taxation, and corporate controller area. Perhaps you could just share with us, how do you plan on implementing some of these really big asks, especially when it comes to something as new as carbon-based budgeting or gender-based budgeting?
Yeah.
Through you, Chair.
Through the chair, I appreciate the councillor's description of these initiatives as big initiatives. And so while they form part of our work plan for 2024 leading into 25, specific to gender-based budgeting, looking at equity with respect to budgeting, green bonds have been part of our work plan. It's not that, you know, we haven't sought out opportunities. It's just how to participate in that space. The constraint really is capacity. And so within the organization is we had a number of large initiatives that really absorbed our staffing resources, whether it's stormwater billing review, our water billing, transition execution, the vacant unit tax, moving to this new budget process, a consolidated tax budget process with an expedited process. That took more effort and resources than we originally expected. So again, not dismissing those initiatives and effort, and they do form part of our work plan, and council's identified those as items for us to report back on. It's really a balance between capacity and prioritizing some of the work. And for 2023 and then going into 2024, it will continue to be transitioning with a water billing system going into
Constraints. When will those particular items be tackled in this term of council? Through you, Chair?
Yep. Through the chair, to be clear, they are on the 2024 work plan. We'll likely need to engage and we'll likely need to engage some external resources, consultants, to help with respect to some of those opportunities in terms of revising the budget process. But I expect those to be a series of conversations rather than in order to achieve the following, this is how you do it. It's going to require a bit of a scan in terms of those jurisdictions who have embarked on those budget process, and then best practices and how to get there, and then subsequent conversations on how we may, as a municipality, transition there. So not to suggest just to confirm, it will form part of report back leading into the 2025 budget process. But again, that will likely form a series of conversations with council in terms of how to potentially transition in that direction.
Thank you. Moving on to a different tact, through you, Chair, is looking at the IT strategy and our digital strategy. It's a very conservative number of 1 FTE. So I was wondering if I could just get an update through you to perhaps Chief Digital Officer Tarani to get a sense for where we're at in this IT strategy. And it's a pretty hefty strategy. So I'm just questioning, is the 1 FTE viable, through you, Chair?
And through the chair, I'll also invite our acting director, Doug Kay, to speak to the IT strategy. It's through Doug's leadership and his management team that they've refreshed that IT strategy.
Through the chair, Doug Kay, acting director of information technology. The IT strategy is a multi-year. It's multi-pronged. It's been developed to sustain the business and improve the business going forward, but also build foundational elements of our information technology foundations. Agreed, 1 FTE is a small ask, but it's a critical one for the 2024 to help us really continue to arrange and more portfolio manage the work that we're doing right now.
Thank you.
Cyrus Strani, Chief Digital Officer, through you, Chair, to Councillor Wang. Thank you for that question. And I think between your comments and comments made by Councillor Kretsch, we do have work coming ahead of us. We try to take a conservative approach across the enterprise to utilize resources that we currently have. And we're in this foundation building stage component that Council Director Mercanti also mentioned, where we have a series of systems that are going to be deprecated or end of life, and we have a bunch of new complex systems coming on board, and we also have work that we want to develop around the enterprise customer service strategy. So I would position this year as sort of an understanding and digging into the weeds year, but definitely to your point, and that was made by other councillors, is that there is going to be an uplift. We were just trying to be conservative in how we deliver that, so we understand the complexities of the various systems that we're dealing with to deliver that newer form of service delivery and enhance our obsolete systems, whether it be enterprise management, customer relationship management, telephone system upgrades, point of sale upgrades, voice of the customer, different customer experiences. There's a lot of dependencies and hooks that all these systems have together, never mind taking down our current systems that we've been living with for many years and have reached their long in the tooth and need to be replaced. So I would, propose that in 2025, as we come forward for that budgeting cycle, we'll be able to better define, and definitely there will be a need for additional FTEs, but we've tried to be really conscious this year to utilize existing resources as we build those foundations.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions.
Thank you, Councillor Wang. Last on our speakers list, Councillor Pauls.
Thank you, and through the chair. Thank you, GM Zagarek. I'm just wondering, I think I heard you say that we already hired 9 FTEs for the 2024 tax levy for the vacant tax. Is that correct?
Yeah. Through the chair, that's not correct. So, and recognizing there's been some iterations of the vacant unit tax, we did hire a supervisor with respect to the vacant unit tax. We were in process in November and December to hire and onboard additional staff, expecting to introduce a vacant unit tax for 2023 and implement that in 2024. Because of Council's decision, we paused on that, and then we will prepare, subject to Council approval of the bylaw this year, we'll then prepare to implement this for 2025. So again, Council approved 16 FTEs. We had hired 1 supervisor. We worked across the organization as through Director McMullen's report to committee last week. There are a number of efforts across the organization in terms of positioning to execute on the vacant unit tax. Subject to the approval of the bylaw, we will recruit those FTEs to implement the vacant unit tax for 2024. Again, subject to approval of the bylaw.
Okay, so for 2025, we will have to hire 15 then, right?
So through the chair, in terms of again, Council approved 16 FTEs. Those 16 FTEs are all reflected in that complement of 542. In terms of the 9 that we've reflected in 2023, and in 2022, with the approval of that budget, again, we reflected 6 FTEs with respect to the vacant unit, 7 FTEs with respect to vacant unit tax in 2022. So all that complement is reflected, and then you would have seen through the revenue sources, we had assumed that a portion of the proceeds would go towards offsetting the administrative costs.
Okay, so I just want to make it simpler for myself. When will the residents see their tax hike because of these 16 that we have hired? 2023 or 2024 or 2025?
So through the chair, to be clear, this will not impact residents in general. The strategy is that the costs associated with administering the vacant unit tax will be funded through the proceeds. So it'll only be, again, this will be the vast majority of residents, 99% will be exempt. It is that small percentage that will not be exempt. The proceeds, as it relates to the vacant unit tax, will go towards funding the administration, and then over and above that, if there's any available funding, those then can be applied towards council priorities. So again, this will not impact the general taxpayer. It will only impact those who have vacant properties, and those properties aren't being rented or occupied or used for the majority of the year.
We understood all of that. I'm just wondering, what about if it doesn't pan out, that we do not recover the money? Would it go in our tax levy?
Through the chair, then we would come back to council and seek direction. If the program is having success in terms of transitioning units to be occupied and to provide housing. Again, that's the principal objective.
Yeah.
And then with respect to the funding of the program, we would come back. But we would come back to council with those updates if we identified that there were funding shortfall. And again, that could represent adjusting in terms of the resourcing as well. And so again, a lot of assumptions in terms of not knowing number of properties and the number of properties that will require auditing with respect to vacancy. But we'll continue to provide updates to council in terms of the execution and implementation of that program.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Not seeing any further speakers on the Corporate Services Department budget presentation. So I will need a mover and a seconder to receive. Moved by Councillor Wang, seconded by Councillor Beattie. Thank you, General Manager Zagaric, and all your staff. That is approved unanimously. On to item 6.2, the City Manager's Office 2024 budget presentation. Jason Thorne, the General Manager of Planning and Economic Development, will provide the presentation.
And through the chair, if I may, as General Manager Thorne gets set up, I'll just say that we're pleased to present the proposed 2024 budget for the City Manager's Office. So there are no questions about why I'm not presenting. That's because the General Manager was acting City Manager at the time, so we felt it most appropriate for him to present. But I want to assure you that upon my arrival, I reviewed with him, and I am also supportive of what is being presented. I do intend to complete a comprehensive review of the City Manager's Office in my first quarter to ensure that everything is running efficiently and effective and the budget is aligned with the priorities so that we can successfully deliver on Council's priorities.
Thank you for the introduction, City Manager Clucky. General Manager?
And fingers crossed my new boss is okay with what I'm about to present here this morning. So thanks very much for the opportunity to present the City Manager's Office budget, and having not worked on or presented a CMO budget before, I do want to really thank the directors and the leadership team within the CMO for all the heavy lifting they did to pull this together, and especially our support team in finance, Maya Walters and Monique Garwood, for all of their assistance. So this is our "We Are Here" slide, and we are still here. The red arrow hasn't moved since Mike showed it a few moments ago. As with the other departmental presentations you'll see this week, my purpose this morning is to present this for information, to answer any questions, not looking for any decisions or directions at this time. That will come in the coming days. I'll begin with an overview of the org chart within our CMO. The team is, of course, led by our new City Manager, Marnie Clucky, and it includes as well the Office of the Auditor General, Charles Brown, Human Resources led by Laura Fontana, our Chief Digital Officer, Cyrus Tarani, Communications and Strategic Initiatives led by Matthew Grant, and our Government Relations and Community Engagement team led by Morgan Stahl. And collectively, this team delivers a number of really key support services across the corporation, which are outlined in these two slides here. So before I take you through the proposed CMO 2024 budget, I thought I'd talk about a couple of the themes within the budget that are really designed to try to advance some of the priorities that this council has set. And of course, much of the work of the City Manager's Office is really focused on the delivery of the responsiveness and transparency council priority. One of these is related to getting more people involved in decision-making and problem-solving. Just yesterday, I guess it was, Council approved a new public engagement policy for the city to get more consistency in the public engagement approaches being undertaken across the corporation. The Government Relations and Community Engagement team is also helping with the review of the role of the advisory committees, supporting the work of the Mayor's Task Force on Transparency, Access, and Accountability, both of which, it's important to note, aren't just council priorities, also key recommendations coming out of the Just Recovery Task Force that team is supporting. In the 2024 budget, you'll see some recommended new investments to advance this council priority. That includes sustainable funding for the Hamilton Anti-Racism Resource Centre and an increased investment in the City Enrichment Fund. The City's Manager's Office is also focused on the council priorities related to customer service and proactive communication. You'll see in the 2024 budget, we're proposing investments in both staffing and technology to advance the customer service strategy and also to improve accessibility and AODA compliance of city documents. Through our Chief Digital Officer, Cyrus Tarani, the City Manager's Office is the lead for the implementation of the digital strategy, which was approved in 2023, and you'll see some investments in the 2024 budget related to further advancing that work. And Council's also identified as a priority building a high-performance public service. This, of course, is the work that is led by Laura Fontana and her HR team. They spent a lot of effort in 2023 rolling out action plans, responding to our employee survey across the corporation. The investments in the 2023 investments through the recruitment and retention strategy, we have seen a noticeable improvement in terms of the non-union attrition across the corporation. And then in the 2024 budget, you'll see some additional staffing and technology investments to improve HR support for city departments. There's also an important role for the CMO in advancing the council priority related to sustainable economic and ecological development. This is largely through the government relations team within the CMO, who are very focused on advocating for the city and looking to increase funding first for key services from senior levels of government. This, of course, was a major theme of the conversation on Tuesday when we had the housing presentation. So in 2023, that meant ensuring we had strong city representation at important forums such as AMO, Roma, the Ontario Big City Mayors, Federation of Canadian Municipalities, and at the city's leads with all of those organizations, Councillors Nan, Tattison, Wang, and of course the Mayor, have the support that they need to advocate for the city's interests. Overall, last year, that GR team helped support over 40 meetings with ministers, deputy ministers, local elected officials to advance the city's interests, and that is a very big part of our 2024 work plan as well. So we'll turn now to the operating budget. As shown on this slide, the CMO's net operating budget increase for 2024, excluding consideration of any of the recommended enhancements, which I'll talk about in a moment, is 5.5%. That represents a budget pressure of just over $840,000. So this represents the investment that's needed to maintain our current service levels and programs, taking into account the pressures and mitigations I'm going to talk about in a moment. And then also on this chart in the bottom right-hand corner is an overall CMO budget increase of 7.3%. So that takes into account some operational investments and enhancements that I'll speak about later in the presentation. For the most part, these increases are due to employee-related costs. This includes in the CMO administration area a reduced chargeback to some of the operating divisions for some of the services provided within the City Manager's Office. We have some salary pressures related to some job reevaluations, for example, in the digital office area. And then in the government relations team, you can see the impacts here of the full annualization of 2 FTE that were approved in last year's budget. With respect to staff complement, again, excluding enhancements, there's no change in the FTE count within the City Manager's office. So this table reflects, as Mike noted, the already approved staff complement. What I'll speak about in a moment is the recommended enhancements would add 3 FTE to the staff complement within the City Manager's office. The CMO is mostly levy funded. There are some external revenue sources related to our work in corporate sponsorships and some partnerships like City Lab that do bring in some additional revenues to the CMO. Looking at the budget drivers, the pressures that we're seeing in the CMO budget really are for the most part the same as the corporate-wide ones that Mike has spoken about, and most notably employer-related costs. That's the primary driver. That would have represented a 5.9% budget pressure in the CMO. And as I already mentioned, annualization of enhancements that were approved in the previous budget, another 0.7%. So that would have represented a 6.6% budget increase within the city manager's office, but we did look at different ways to mitigate those pressures as well. Notably, two things. We looked at reducing some of our consulting and contractual budgets in order to fund some of the staffing needs that I'll be talking about in a moment, in effect to repurpose some of that consulting budget to support in-house needs. And then I won't go into details on the gapping target. Mike just spoke through that, but similarly to what he presented in corporate services, we were able to achieve some savings within the CMO through an increased gapping target. So I'm going to turn now to some of the operational investments that are within the CMO budget. You'll see that we have 5 recommended operational investments. 2 of those are council referred. And I'll start with those council referred items. The first, council may recall in November, council referred an investment of $190,000 annualized to provide sustainable funding to the Hamilton Anti-Racism Resource Center. This investment would represent $115,000 net levy on the 2024 budget. So council did hear from Executive Director Lyndon George during the public delegations about this investment and the work of that center. Again, this is also one of the items that was identified as a recommendation and priority coming out of the Just Recovery Task Force. So HARC was established in 2018. Its role is to provide resources and support to residents experiencing racism, to collect and report statistically on incidents and trends with respect to racism, and to provide information, education, and advocacy regarding anti-racism and anti-discrimination. To date, funding for HARC has been provided through reserve funding, and so that current funding expires in April of 2024. And so this investment would provide for sustainable annual funding for HARC, subject to a service agreement that they'd enter into with the city to be able to continue their work on a sustainable basis. The next item is an increase to the City Enrichment Fund. So the 2024 budget includes a proposed increase to the City Enrichment Fund of $526,000. Currently, CEF invests about $6.5 million in local charities, not-for-profit organizations, grassroots organizations doing important work in our community across 7 different sectors. This recommended additional investment would represent a continuation of the 8% annual increase to the fund that was discussed in last year's budget, with the goal of reaching the target that council set last year of providing for $9.6 million in annual funding by 2028. Next, there are 3 business cases. The first investment that staff are recommending is for an additional FTE for an HR policy and planning specialist with a net levy impact of $66,000. You'll see this investment in your budget books in that, I think it's Appendix C, where all of the investments are ranked in what we called the enabling administrative services. And SLT had a fair bit of conversation around some of these investments to reflect that as new services are introduced in the city, as new operations, as operations are expanded, we need to make sure we're investing in those enabling administrative services to support them. And this is one of those that was identified by HR and by SLT as a really critical need. To reduce the levy impact of this investment, as I already noted, we looked internally within the HR budget and repurposed some of the consulting and contractual external costs in order to provide some of the funding for this position, which is why it's showing as a net levy impact of just $66,000. Next is a recommended investment of 1 additional FTE at a net levy impact of $12,200 for a senior project manager in the digital services team. This is a position that already exists and has existed for a couple of years, but as a temporary position. So this is a role that has supported a wide range of work delivered by Cyrus and his team related to the customer service strategy, the digital strategy, and the recommendation here is to make that position a permanent position. Again, to reduce the levy impact, we've looked at repurposing some of our consulting and contractual costs in order to cover a portion of the cost of making that a permanent position within the digital office. Lastly, staff are recommending an investment of 1 FTE at an annualized impact of $140,500 and a 2024 net levy impact of just over $70,000 to advance some really much needed work around digital accessibility of city documents. Again, this is one of the critical needs that came through SLT as a really key support role we need across the corporation, and it's enlisted as one of those enabling administrative services in your budget books. We know from our third-party review that we have a low compliance rate when it comes to accessibility of city documents, and that our staff capacity and our in-house expertise is going to be a limitation in getting to the compliance where we want to be. So this additional staffing investment would allow us to have a dedicated in-house resource to focus on accessibility both of historical documents as well as implementing standards to ensure full compliance on a go-forward basis. So the last slide of the operating budget is the three-year outlook. The main pressures to note here in the 2025 budget relate to 3 further FTE enhancements that we anticipate bringing forward in the coming year for the 2025 budget. One of those in the Auditor General's office, one of those in the digital office, and one of those in the Government and Community Relations office. So those will be before Council for consideration prior to the 2025 budget. Turn now to the preliminary capital budget. The CMO has a relatively small capital budget with just a couple of items. The first one I'll note here on the left within Human Resources has a capital budget investment of just under $1 million towards the corporate-wide rollout of the Chronos system. So in 2023, staff completed a citywide review of how the different divisions and departments are managing schedules and attendance. Many are using outdated software or manual processes in order to track that. This actually speaks directly to the question Councillor Clark asked of Mike Zagarek earlier in terms of having a more automated citywide system for tracking scheduling and attendance. So Enterprise UKG, what we call Chronos, was identified as the preferred solution, and this investment would start the rollout of that citywide. This is a system we're already using in some areas of the corporation, in public health, Hamilton Water, lodges, with good success. So this investment represents a first phase in 2024, and it would be a 2-year project with a total cost of $7.4 million. So that's also included within the multi-year budget outlook. Next, on the right-hand side of this slide, I referenced earlier that one of the critical investments identified by SLT is related to digital accessibility. So I mentioned earlier the recommendations include 1 FTE within the operating budget to have a permanent in-house resource to support that work. But we also have some catching up to do. So what we're recommending through the capital budget is funding of $224,000 for 3 temporary staff for a 2-year period to address the backlog that we have to clean up around accessibility of city documents. And lastly, within the Digital Innovation Office, we have a number of capital budget investments that are being brought forward. Some of these are brought forward by the Digital Innovation Office, but they're really to support other areas of the city. $75,000 for software costs to advance data maturity for our open data program. $150,000 to support the intelligent community strategy and broadband strategy. $200,000, which is a shared investment amongst fire, paramedics, police, IT, to advance a business case for the implementation of a public safety network to support emergency response, and $250,000 for a capital project to advance the customer service strategy and roadmap. So I'll end with just a bit of a summary of what I have presented today. So this is the proposed 2024 budget for the City Manager's Office. It represents a 7.7% is the net levy increase in the operating budget to maintain our existing services and programs, minus 2.1% for the mitigations that were identified, and an additional 1.7% for the enhancements, which brings us to that total of 7.3% that I showed on the earlier slide. For capital, the CMO budget includes just over $1.8 million in recommended investments. And then not shown on this slide, but just to repeat, those enhancements that I spoke about would add 3 FTE to the CMO budget. And in the circle graph on the right, the City Manager's Office represents just half of the Corporate Services Office budget at 0.1% of the net levy impact. So that's my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, General Manager Thorne. I do have one speaker on the speakers list so far. Councillor Wang, please.
Hi. Thank you, Chair. Question about AODA, because we do have regulations that we need to be compliant with up to 2025. These I see are only in regards to the historical documents. What about the other aspects of AODA? How is that being factored in? Through you, Chair.
I'm going to throw that one to Matthew Grant.
Right. Through the chair to the councillor, Matthew Grant, Director of Communications and Strategic Initiatives. These particular resources are meant to provide an ongoing service for new documents that are coming in. Specifically, we're targeting PDFs that are going on the website and on eScribe, which have a very low compliance rate. And then the 3 temporary staff are to try to address the backlog. So we're trying to provide a service on an ongoing basis, as well as clear the backlog. Communications and strategic initiatives for our website, for the hamilton.ca website, are going to provide, I guess, a deadline for when we will no longer be accepting any non-compliant documents, and that will dovetail in with phase 2 of website development and search engine optimization. And so we'll also be able to have the added benefit of meta tagging and the like to make them more searchable, and that's the effort, Councillor.
Follow-up question then through you, Chair, is this part of the digital strategy or is this part of AODA? When we access documents through, say, eScribe that then go on to our website, it's a mess on the back end. Many times when you're trying to read the documents, sometimes they're labeled incorrectly, they're tagged incorrectly. It's hard to do a search on that. Is that also part of the AODA, or is that part of digital strategy? Through you, Chair.
Through the chair to the councillor. So I would suggest it's part of both. What these resources are designed to do is allow us to start addressing a known problem, and I agree with you. Those are hard to search and hard to access. While Human Resources on their work plan has a broader corporate-wide accessibility audit, and that will determine sort of where those resources or resource lives permanently and what other elements that we need to tackle. And in terms of the digital strategy, making the documents more searchable will include things such as meta tagging and the like. And we're looking at roughly 90,000 documents historical, as well as the go-forward documents that we're looking to address.
On switching tacks and going down a different line of questioning, Chair, one of the slides, which was, I think, early on, Slide 9, Sustainable Economic and Ecological Development, there are 5 points on here specific to how government relations is supporting council on advocacy through different levels of government. Chair, I wonder, what is the resourcing that we need in order to make this slide much more effective so that we can actually do a better job of advocating to different levels of government and to other private sector partners or anything to that effect?
So through the chair, I'll start and I'll ask Morgan to elaborate. Just note that this is one of the areas we noted in the 2025 outlook where we'd be looking to bring forward a staffing investment to bolster that work, because it is becoming an increasing workload issue to support all of those different forums. I didn't read through all of the bullet points on this slide when I was presenting, but we do have some notable successes, I think, in terms of the fruits of those labors. But I'll let Morgan elaborate.
Through the chair, just to add on to General Manager Thorne's comments, those notable successes have also resulted in significant revenue for the corporation. So right now within the Government Relations and Community Engagement team, there is only a half FTE dedicated to this work, which is half of my role. Within the city manager's office, there is also a senior advisor, strategic policy and government relations role that has historically been a temporary position that right now is currently vacant. So just in terms of supporting this work on an ongoing basis, of course, I participate in supporting council as well as the mayor and her priorities. And there are also individuals within the mayor's office that do a similar type of work in order to ensure that our government relations efforts are seen and heard. But from a resourcing perspective, right now it is only half of an FTE that is dedicated to supporting this.
Chair, I will say that Director Stahl has been the most influential to myself doing that work at AMO, and I'm pretty sure that she's been super helpful to FCM and Councillor Nan. This is a particularly important area that we may need to seriously consider for perhaps not the 2024, but definitely the 2025 budget. Literally, Morgan's doing this off the side of her desk, but it is so incredibly crucial as we are constantly advocating to different levels of government, and we do need that support here at this council level. I think my last question is as it relates to our Indigenous team. I do know that the Indigenous team sits in Healthy and Safe, but we are talking a nation-to-nation type communication and conversation. I wonder at some point, will there be consideration for Indigenous to be moved into a more prominent location, potentially in the city manager's office? Through you, Chair, I'm not sure who to direct that potential question to.
So I know that has come up in some of the conversations. I don't think there's no particular plan at the moment in terms of what that will look like, but I know that, as part of the organizational review that HR is doing, and I know as part of the review that City Manager Clucky is doing, new in the role in terms of looking at those service areas. Certainly, I think that's something that can be considered at that time, but none of that is reflected in what I've presented today.
Thank you. Those are all my questions.
Thank you, Councillor. Next on our speakers list, Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. The first question is with regards to the Hamilton Anti-Racism Resource Center. It shows on the charts $190,000. My recollection was that Lyndon George was asking for $200,000. I know it's not a big difference, but it can become a community relations difference unless we have a rationale why there is that variance.
I'm going to look to Morgan on that one.
Yes, through the chair. So city staff met with Lyndon George when we went over his sustainability plan, and $190,000 was identified as what was needed annualized. Members of council may recall that $75,000 was approved through the tax stabilization reserve, which will take HARC to April 2024. So the amount for the 2024 budget that was being recommended was $115,000, which will supplement the difference, bringing the total to $190,000 for 2024, and then annualized beyond that. So this was a conversation that happened in collaboration with Lyndon, the executive director of the Hamilton Anti-Racism Resource Center, in addition to conversations that were had with their board. So I believe we came to a collective agreement on the $190,000 being a sustainable amount for HARC for ongoing funding.
Thank you. I knew there would be an answer, and I'm grateful that Lyndon was at the table when we came to that conclusion, because we had committed when we were going through that work, that there would be annualized funding for that committee's work. Just one final comment to agree with my colleague, Councillor Wang. We do need to look at how we're handling the Indigenous communities and Indigenous governments that we are dealing with on a regular basis. From my experience on the Joint Stewardship Board, there is a feeling from certain parties within the Haudenosaunee that we are giving them short thrift, and I don't believe that is the intent. The Joint Stewardship Board has worked very hard to get things moving within the Red Hill Valley, but there is a constant reminder as to the city of Hamilton, in their words, has to get their act together in terms of how they deal with the Haudenosaunee. And they seem to take offense, and I've not quite grasped it, but if staff are talking to them, they don't want to talk to city staff. They will only talk to elected members, which truly does complicate things when we're trying to deal with things. So I just put it out there. I agree with Councillor Wang that at some point we need to move it to the appropriate division. It may be the mayor's office, because the mayor is the one that does most of the discussions with those Indigenous governments. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Nan, next on our speakers list.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Just also wanted to pick up on the GR component and recognizing the great work that was done around the policy support. I know I leaned on it quite a bit for my role at FCM, as well as working with having our staff and GR work directly with policy staff at FCM, and how that is congruent and supports my ability to put forward those resolutions at the table. So I just wanted to get clarity from what Director Stahl said, that previous temporary position that is now vacant, is that in this 2024 budget? Does it remain a vacant position that will be filled in 2024?
Through the chair, I can speak to that. Yes, it's a vacancy just because the incumbent got a very exciting new role elsewhere in the city, and so it does have to be backfilled. So it's not a new investment; it's already in the budget.
It's already accounted for that position to be filled. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So not seeing any further speakers, I then need a mover and a seconder to receive the presentation. Moved by Councillor Maureen Wilson, seconded by Councillor Wang. All in favor or opposed? Thank you, General Manager Thorne. City Manager Clucky. That carries unanimously. So we do have one item for discussion on today's agenda, item 7.1, the living wage report. We're going to put this on the floor and then open the floor for discussion. So I need a mover and a seconder to put this on the floor. Moved by Councillor Alex Wilson, seconded by Councillor Nan. Is there any discussion on the report and recommendations? Councillor Alex Wilson, please.
Thank you. Not moving anything, just to let everyone know. Fully supportive of the report and the recommendations. I do think that our city could move further when it goes to living wage, but I also know that we have to make those actions with our community partners. We have to do that together, and I think it also involves work with those community partners and work outside of our budget process. And so just flagging a intention to work with human resources to potentially have more information about living wage come to us outside of the budget process, much like a housing investment or anything else we do, and then we could refer the budgetary process to the budget process. Just so the first time we talk about this in a year doesn't start within the budget process, and we can have the policy conversation separate from the budget conversation and then come back to the budget conversation like we do everything else. But for today, very supportive of these recommendations and indicating some work I'm hoping to do for the next budget process. So you can consider that a very lengthy notice of motion if you'd like.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm not seeing any further speakers. So with that, all in favor or opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you. So with that, we will move to adjournment. Moved by Councillor Jackson. Oh, certainly, yes. Go ahead.
My apologies, Budget Chair. I thought you would say any other business before we adjourn, but no problem. So going into tomorrow, I'm just asking for process clarification. I see that we've got a heavy-duty agenda tomorrow, 2 major departments presenting. I've already seen some notices of motions, as you had requested, between yourself and Budget Vice Chair Maureen Wilson. And so I'm just wanting to understand the lay of the land tomorrow. After we hear the 2 major budget presentations by those 2 important departments, notices of motions, that is then to set the course over the weekend into next week? Or are some members going to suddenly ask to waive their notices because they feel their matter is extremely important and we need to deal with it tomorrow? I just don't want to be surprised or caught off guard. Budget Chair Danko, what was your expectation, please?
Excellent question, and appreciate the opportunity to put that on the table with all of committee. So the intention is that, as you mentioned, we have those 2 really substantial departments. So I'm really hoping that any motions that are coming forward will remain notices tomorrow on the 26th for full debate and discussion on the 30th. We're going to be, probably near the end of the day tomorrow by the time we get to the rest of the budget. And, the 30th is booked for an entire day for discussion on the budget in its entirety. So that's my hope. Now, of course, members are, if there's something that they really think needs to be on the agenda for debate tomorrow, we're following the procedural rules of order, so that is possible. But certainly our intention, as we set out at the beginning, is that all notices would be this week. Anything that might be coming forward. I know there's quite a few that are being pitched in the background. We're going to have a meeting later today to kind of discuss that as well. But hopefully those will be reserved to the 30th for debate.
Really appreciate your prudence and guidance on that, and I accept that direction, Budget Chair Danko. And if someone like myself doesn't get in writing by tomorrow the notice of motion, I do have the next 3 days before the 30th to disseminate that to my colleagues by email. Is that correct as well? Or must the notices be in writing by tomorrow?
No, and again, we're following the procedural rules of order. So if there's something that comes forward that's related to the budget, any member of council can put that on the table. It doesn't need to be in writing. But again, we're really hoping that anything that does come forward at least is circulated to your colleagues and also to the clerk's office so that we're able to see the actual text in advance of making that decision.
Your response and
And
explanation, at least for me, has been very important. Thank you, Budget Chair Danko.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Councillor McMeekin, did you have something else to add?
Yes, I noticed the clerk has included the 4% cap motion on the agenda. Are we going to discuss that today?
That's on the agenda for tomorrow. Okay, so I believe that was referred to the budget process, and from previous discussions, is your intention to have that discussion on that motion tomorrow? It's on the agenda as I haven't looked at tomorrow's agenda.
I wonder if in the context of the discussion and if it might be prudent to tackle that first, given it's designed to give guidance to the horseshoe.
Well, we're going to go through the departmental presentations.
Okay.
And if we do want to have that debate tomorrow, we can certainly do that. I think your motion is a little bit different than ones that are coming out of the budget in that it was referred.
That's why I draw attention to it, yeah.
Yeah.
So we do that tomorrow.
Yes,
Okay? Thanks.
that's good with everyone? Okay? Okay. Now to adjournment. Moved by Councillor Kretsch, seconded by Councillor Nan. All in favor or opposed? I know. That is unanimous. Thank you. We are adjourned.